I hope you enjoyed your lunches and that great talk from Alexis Bonnell. I thought that was wonderful to hear from her. Why don't we have the panel take your seats, and I'm going to introduce the panel, or I'm going to introduce the topic and introduce Carrie, our moderator. So we're very fortunate to have USTDA and MCC here together with us on a panel. They are part of the constellation, of course, of U.S. foreign assistance agencies. They're both thriving, I think we could say, at this point in the administration, and we're going to hear a lot about what they're doing and what they're up to. So it's very good to have both of you guys here. Let me introduce Carrie Lowry, who's going to be moderating the session. And she may not want me to tell you this, but she was in Chicago yesterday. She was supposed to fly back this morning. Her plane was greatly delayed, and she basically came straight from the airport. So we're we're very thankful that you did make it, Carrie. Carrie is the Vice President for Global Programs at the Wilson Center. She has had a 20-plus year career in the public sector, or the private sector, or the philanthropic sector. In addition to working at the Wilson Center, she was the Chief of Staff and the COO of the Millennium Challenge Corporation. She's worked at USAID, at the State Department, at the Peace Corps, and at the National Security Council. So she's got all the bases covered. Carrie, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Wade, and good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to be here today. I am extremely excited to introduce to you two amazing leaders leading the agency for the Millennium Challenge Corporation, Dan Petrie, and Tom Hardy, who is leading the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. These are two leaders that have been at their agencies for a very long career, both of them. I will let them share a little bit more about themselves. But they've also been steering the ship through some of the bumpy waters over the past couple years. And I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation of what the agencies are doing, what they've been focused on, a bit more about their models, which is a bit different to some of you in the room. And just really excited to introduce them and their work to you all, and to see where we can really take some of these collaborative and partnership efforts moving forward. So with that, I would love to maybe go down the line, if this works for you both. And Tom, start with you and see if you would be willing to share a little bit about USTDA, your model, and maybe give us an example or two of your work that might be of interest to the community.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I was met just months or so ago with the SID Leadership Group, and really a pleasure and appreciate the invitation to be here. For USTDA, I don't know how many of you all know USTDA. I understand our former director, Anna Obong, was here earlier this morning. But USTDA is the first mover on infrastructure projects. As the first mover, we get money appropriated from Congress to take smart risks on infrastructure development. What does smart risks mean? We take the earliest stage in the capital stack. We take grant funding for project preparation, the earliest work that needs to be done to help our partners in emerging markets define the infrastructure that they seek to invest and implement. For USTDA, that means critical minerals projects, transport projects, energy, and digital infrastructure. It's the core of what USTDA is and what we have been. I think that there has been some rough roads, but I think as I look at the future before us, what we're doing is a lot of what we have always done. Our mission remains the same. How we talk about it is different, and we can talk about that a little bit, but I was fortunate to lead the U.S. Trade and Development Agency during the first Trump administration and continue in that role in the second administration. And we're doing just some really fascinating work in the digital space. In Palau, we were just talking about Palau in the Pacific Island region, helping to deploy novel American and trusted vendor technology to essentially rip and replace their Chinese network with American technologies and like-minded technologies. And I think that goes to the heart of what USTDA has been and where we're going, which is our mission remains the same, supporting exports of American goods and services while also supporting the economic development of our partner countries. I think the third layer, or the filter that I talk about with my team, is this national security lens. Everything we look at is, how does this not only impact our partners, how does it help open markets for U.S. exports, but what does it mean to support our national security? And I don't mean national security by defense, I mean economic security is national security. There are a lot of projects, healthcare projects, transportation projects in the Indo-Pacific that actually do have a national security implication for us, even though they're strictly a commercial development from both the U.S. government and our partner countries' interests. So I think stop there and let Dan, and then we can go.
Great. Well, let me add my thanks as well. It's really good to see all of you. This SID Washington conference has been a fixture for many years, and it's just nice to see folks back together, familiar faces in the room. Catherine, thanks for having us. Wade, Carrie, appreciate your leadership. So MCC was founded with a single question in mind, and that is, in a time-limited and transparent way, how do we work with well-governed countries to unlock growth? And growth that is good for our partners, and that's growth that is good for the United States. And we do that by combining large strategic infrastructure with challenging policy institutional reforms to jumpstart key economies. And I think that the agency's core tenets, the way we work, which we can get into a bit more, but we're selective, we're time limited, there's greater elements of cost sharing and accountability. I think this is exactly what this moment calls for. I was in Mongolia actually just last month, where we wrapped up a large water supply compact, and this wasn't just connecting a few new households, which is great. It was building a large wastewater recycling plant that is going to be used for industry, combined with an advanced water purification facility designed with American ingenuity and tech that is going to increase the water supply in Ulaanbaatar by 80%. Now, why do we do that? This is a relatively young democracy, sandwiched between Russia and China. It's going to, they want to partner with the United States. This is going to not only generate local jobs within Mongolia, but this is going to be good in terms of setting the table for additional private sector investment. Mongolia had skin in the game. They contributed $112 million to this project. They also increased their water tariff by 40%, so that the sector is actually cost reflective, it's sustainable, it's going to protect kind of long-term U.S. government investment, U.S. taxpayer money in the sector. Despite the challenges of working in a country like Mongolia, the construction season's like 10 minutes long there. Although I was there in May and it was lovely. MCC delivered on time and on budget, right? So this is what the agency does. I'll give you one more example. In Sierra Leone, there's only about 30% of the country or so that has access to electricity. So what is MCC doing? We are building out a first-of-its-kind national dispatch center within Sierra Leone, as well as 150 miles of an energy transmission backbone along the southern corridor of the country that's going to connect into the West African power pool. That's going to do a couple things. It's not only going to dramatically increase access to electricity within Sierra Leone, that's good, but it's also helping to connect U.S. iron ore mines, rutile mines, to the sector. That's going to help drive down, or to the grid, that's going to help drive down costs, as well as potentially support their expansion. So I think that we also unlocked kind of a broader critical minerals deal, and in Sierra Leone, helping to enable a DFC-led deal. So basically, MCC's investment in the sector was enabling additional follow-on investments. And that's, I think, where USTDA and MCC share a lot of common ground. So this is the kind of work that MCC does: strategic infrastructure, challenging policy and institutional reforms to drive change.
Great, thank you, Tom and Dan. So you both touched on infrastructure a little bit in the examples that you were providing. And I think, Dan, you kind of were starting to go there with your example with Sierra Leone, but I'd love to hear how you work together as two agencies, and as you're thinking through investments in a country, the type of investment, the type of studies that you're doing to see if that investment is going to be sound for the American taxpayer. And then when do you bring in some of those other departments and agencies to be partners with you in that process?
Let me start. I think MCC does such an important job laying the foundation that allows the structure that provides the basis for US TDA to go in. What Dan just mentioned in Sierra Leone, which is a perfect example. MCC is working on the transmission distribution. US TDA did the earliest stage project preparation work for a 100 megawatt gas-fired power project that DFC financed. I mean, that is a perfect example of how we can daisy chain ourselves in a way that has dramatic long-term economic benefits to our partners overseas, but also has a direct benefit to the American taxpayer and U.S. job creation here. As I look across the Indo-Pacific, it's no secret where the compacts are. US TDA is now looking at specific projects in the Pacific that are designed to feed into those compacts. I think that is a unique way that we can look at the investments that are coming by MCC and go to them and say, here are the opportunities we see. And we're now able to be teeing up projects, infrastructure projects. We have two very interesting projects that aren't ready for public consumption yet because they haven't been announced, but that are directly tied to MCC's compacts in the future. And it's a unique way of tying ourselves not to the financing side in the traditional way through DFC and XM, but looking at the MCC model and making sure that the work that USTDA does fits well into MCC's compact structure. And with that comes the important side, which is U.S. jobs, U.S. exports, and I think that benefits both of us.
I think in short, we're always looking to to leverage each other's work, and I would argue that we have a moment now, an opportunity, indeed maybe a mandate, that we should be focused much more deliberately and being much more intentional about how we're leveraging each other's work. This is playing out kind of in a variety of ways for MCC. Tom, you mentioned the Pacific. I know you and I were at a panel at a Pacific Agenda kind of investment summit earlier this year. It was coordinated by Indo-PACOM and the State Department about how do we drive more investment into the Pacific. Our teams now are conducting joint missions and sharing information, particularly in that region, which is great. Just recently, we launched a new mechanism to help facilitate coordination with the DFC as well. This would be using MCC grant funds to help de-risk DFC-led private sector deals. So this would basically be a placeholder in our compacts and thresholds to help align our timelines. MCC helps and TDA helps set the framework, but DFC rightfully works on faster timelines. And so we want to make sure that when they're ready to move, that if we can be helpful, we want to be able to be there. This is actually going to be part of a Philippines threshold program, which our board of directors is going to be considering next week. Maybe a more kind of comprehensive example, looking at Mozambique and the graphite supply chain or critical mineral supply chain there in particular. There's a group called Syra Resources. They are mining graphite in northern Mozambique. That's being processed in Vidalia, Louisiana, just a few miles north of Baton Rouge. DFC is helping to support kind of mining operations. MCC is building out roads and kind of the transport corridor within the Nacala kind of region. That's going to decrease the costs and the time to get things to the port. We've got DOE that's involved stateside. I know TDA, you guys are doing rare earth feasibility studies in the region as well. And so this is really kind of a complete package. And I think, in this moment, finding ways to reach scale, finding ways to better coordinate is really, in finding ways, how do we kind of unlock this private sector-led growth is really what's going to help us take this good work forward and drive change.
Thank you, Dan and Tom. So you've both touched on a bit working with industry and the private sector. And obviously you have many stakeholders here in the room who are very interested to get to know you all better, the work that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you work with industry, maybe some of the things that you are trying that are a little bit different maybe in times past, and where there may be some collaborative partnerships here between the public and the private partners?
Go for it.
Sure. Thank you. Sure, absolutely. I mean, for USTDA, every activity USTDA finances overseas is set aside for American companies. Those, by statute, by our own policies, the work we do and the investments we give, the grants we sign, they're set aside for American companies. And I already meeting people in the room saying, how do we get in? I think the first thing for USTDA is reach out to our regional teams. As an agency, we're very, very small. It's almost embarrassing how small we are for what we do.
Small but mighty.
Small but mighty, but our regional teams are the first line. Just you can go on our website, but what we want to hear is two things. Where you have partners or where you have relationships in emerging markets, where you think that they need help moving a good infrastructure project up the value chain to financing, reach out to us. The other, which I think may be easier as the get-go for over half of our activities, they're competed. So we don't have a U.S. company already identified to do the work. All of those grant opportunities are on our website. I know that a lot of people used to go to the AID's website. No one paid attention to us because we were too small. I think in this day and age, USTDA is as busy as we've ever been. Our website is full of grant opportunities set aside for American companies, and we want more and more companies to be bidding. And really being here with the SID's conference here, what we're trying to do is make sure that we're reaching out to the broadest cross-section of companies we may not have reached out to in the past, because we do have some fascinating projects around the world in emerging markets, in the sectors I talked about, but that we're looking for innovative technologies, expertise that we haven't had in the past. And all of those are on our website. They're on not FedBizOps. What is the new old website? SAM, yes. I mean, all of these are available for you, and really want to make sure that you're paying attention to USTDA's website. You're signing up for our biweekly newsletter so we can get these into your inbox, because we want as many companies bidding on these projects so they can benefit from the expertise you all bring.
Tom, do you guys do industry days? How do you get work? Like, how are you kind of socializing beyond like SID, for example?
We spend a lot of time we don't. USTDA doesn't host industry days per se, but we do rely on U.S. industry to bring us into their. So we do a lot of work with the U.S. Chamber. I was with the Nuclear Energy Institute a couple weeks ago. So like part of our job, both my job and all of our regional directors and country managers, is to get out in front of these trade associations. And as an agency, we're broken down by region, but within the agency, we have cross-regional sector teams, or industry teams. So each of our priority areas has industry expertise on it, and they work together to get our message out to industry writ large.
That's great, and good to know you work with trade associations.
Yes.
Dan, do you want to share a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation now is that every U.S. government employee is a good commercial attaché. And so, can y'all hear me? Okay. And so, agree. Go to MCC's website. There's a Work With Us page. There's updated opportunities as well as business forecasts. In recent months, our board of directors has selected 5 new countries in both the Indo-Pacific, but notably also in the Western Hemisphere. MCC had historically worked in the Western Hemisphere. We, for statutory reasons, had to step back for a little bit. We now are able to work back in the Western Hemisphere, and so that's a growing part of our portfolio. There's opportunities both for MCC partnership and kind of our oversight of our work, as well as partnering directly with our MCAs in countries. So different kinds of procurements, would encourage you to look out for those. In advance of this, I looked yesterday, and there's design build stuff in Mozambique, which I just mentioned, or there's data quality consultancy in Sierra Leone, or there's tax consultancy in Indonesia. So anyway, all kinds of things on there, and we would welcome your feedback on how we can improve. Taking a step back, I think we are generally trying to be much more intentional about how we are engaging with the US private sector, and we're developing a new strategy in that regard in terms of kind of improving the business environment for US firms within these countries, expanding opportunities to grow US exports, as well as securing supply chains. In talking with the US private sector, and we've done 40 plus or so consultations kind of in the lead up to developing this strategy, the number one issue that we hear about from firms is that it's not just about kind of a particular access to a mine or a site or whatever it might be. It's that the surrounding operational and regulatory environment can really make or break a deal, right? Mm-hmm. Money is going to follow the best risk-adjusted return. And so on the regulatory side, you want a clear legal framework. You want streamlined permitting or licensing. You want taxes that make sense. On the operational side, you want those roads. You want access to reliable water or energy, et cetera. In short, you want stability and predictability in a level playing field. And I think that's where MCC can be helpful in terms of setting the table. We work to address kind of systemic binding constraints to economic growth. And so I think there are distinct ways in which we can partner, and we always want to be working with more US firms. More generally, we welcome your thought leadership about like what's holding you back in terms of entering these markets, or how might you expand. I think MCC can be really useful and is uniquely suited to address some of those broader barriers.
Thank you, Dan, for bringing that up. And I will say, putting on my former MCC hat, the agency is very serious about what Dan just said, and listening and taking feedback and really trying to do things better. So highly encourage you to take him up on his offer.
Yeah, please do. We'd love to hear from you.
But Dan, I'd love to maybe go back to a couple things you touched on, maybe starting with the MCA, and just how different the model is that MCC has at headquarters versus in the field. And it looks quite different than any of the other development agencies are out there. And if you can maybe share a little bit more, just kind of how we stand up, or how they're stood up, how they're governed, et cetera, and then how can this community work with them?
Yeah. Compacts are all the rage these days. I don't know if people have noticed, but MCC has this 22-year track record of delivering strategic infrastructure and challenging reforms and generating returns both in countries and for the American people. And so we are eager to kind of share some of these best practices and lessons learned. We are very selective in who we work with, and so we're concentrating our resources in countries that are promoting free markets. There's rule of law. They're making investments in their people. The programs themselves, as I mentioned, are trying to get at this kind of this root cause of like what is the binding constraints to economic growth, and we do a very rigorous process in terms of designing with the countries what these projects look like so that they can generate the greatest impact in country as well as the greatest returns for the US. We're not everywhere, but where we do work, we tend to go big and truly design programs that are at scale. I talked a little bit earlier, but they are time limited, and so compacts are 5 years by statute. Threshold programs, which are compacts, think hundreds of millions of dollars, infrastructure plus reforms. Threshold programs, think tens of millions of dollars, but really getting at the kind of policy institutional reform. there's a shared cost burden. Countries have skin in the game. This is both financial as well as on the policy side. And then we ruthlessly measure the results and put them up on our website, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so you all can see how do we do. And then we can adapt and learn and do better next time. And so the way that we operate is we're fairly lean organization as well. We do set up these local MCAs in country that help really design and partner with us and ultimately implement and then own these projects. And so we're thinking about sustainability and an exit strategy from day one, because at the end of the day, these countries need to carry this work forward. So it is a very different way of